about sheaves of wheat. So we all know that if you're harvesting your wheat, so the process is you snip the long stalks of wheat and you get like a bundle, a handful, and it's not so convenient to hold. So you put a string or something around it. That's called a sheaf. And obviously, a little girl is going to make a smaller sheaf than Charles Barkley. Okay, so the sheaves have varying sizes. Now, if you heap up a huge pile of sheaves and then another huge pile of sheaves, and you put one pile into the wagon and go back to the threshing floor, you're allowed to come back and pick up the second pile. But if you leave an individual sheaf behind, that cannot go back and get, you have to give that to the poor. So the basic rule is 2 sheaves is not a pile, 3 sheaves is a pile. But what happens if you have some Od Malach HaBashan working on your farm and he creates a super sheaf? So we're going to learn about a sheaf, and it's going to say it holds a base seya, and there's a machlokes whether that means so many seeds to sow a base seya or a volume of the whole thing, including the stalks. But that's not important for our purposes. That's a machlokes. But in any event, we're picking up near the bottom of Ayin Beis, Amid Beis.
Just one question.
Yeah.
Why is such an important mitzvah dependent upon forgetfulness?
We use the word forget, but if you drop it and you aren't in other words, you're not being careful in your harvesting,
right?
So you drop it. So we force you to be generous and give it to the poor.
Okay.
But what if you didn't drop it? You put it down. Okay, so we have to have a definition. So the definition is if you put 3 sheaves in a cluster on the ground, that's called a pile.
Right.
And you can go back and get it. I mean, you can't, your wagon doesn't hold, you may have to make several trips. But if you drop an individual sheaf or 2 individual sheaves, you cannot go back. Okay, so now we're going to be talking about a super sheaf. And in some regards, it's going to be a pile all by itself. And in other regards, it's going to be a sheaf like all other sheaves. Okay, so we're at Amar Rav Yehuda, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines from the bottom. Amar Rav Yehuda, Omer sheyesh bo sasayim. If you have a sheaf that has 2 sayas, either of seeds or the total volume of the sheaf is 2 seya, but still a super sheaf. Tyres Aimer Alav, in some regards it's called a sheaf. The Tyres Gadish Alav, and in other regards it's called a stack. So what's the deal? Tyres Aimer Alav, it's called a sheaf. Sheshnei Amurim Shibahen Shivacha, that 2 sheaves is Shichacha. So 1 or 2 sheaves left behind when you take the rest into the threshing floor, that's considered property of the poor people. Okay? Shnayim Vahu. But if you have this super sheaf and you leave it plus 2 normal size sheaves, ein and shichacha, it's 3, and it's therefore not shichacha. And the super sheaf is called a sheaf in regard to the count of getting to 3, so you're allowed to go back and get it. Okay, v'taris gadish alav, but it also has the status of a pile. Now, you're allowed to make a pile and leave it there for a day and a half if you want, and then go get it again. Because obviously it's a huge pile of sheaves and you don't intend to leave it for the poor. So, if you have this super sheaf, and you leave it behind, the super sheaf, all by itself. So if it's a normal sheaf, you leave it all by itself. You have to leave it for the poor. But the super sheaf is considered a pile in regard to going back and getting it. Okay, so I said I didn't want to do it yesterday because of the explanation involved and because two of our key players had departed early. Left early, not departed early. Okay. Amar Rava bar Rav Kana, Amar Reish Lakish. He quotes Reish Lakish. We're going back to the grafted carob or the trimmed sycamore. Charav hamurkav, the grafted carob. The sadin hashikma, and the trimmed sycamore, are consecrated, he holds, along with the tree. I mean, with the underlying land, not like we said yesterday. So, okay. Obo l'machloikis Rebbe Menachem for Rebbe Yossi, and that is a dispute. Now we've come to, literally, the dispute between Rebbe Menachem, Yossi's son, and the rabbis, the Rabbanon. Okay? So the Gemara says, but why should we make this a machlokes between Reb Menachem? Why don't we just say this is the basic machlokes we've talked about for 3 days already between Reb Shimon and the rabbis? That would be a correct also. So lema machlokes Rabbi Shimon Rabbanim. Why didn't he just explain it that it's the standard machlokes we've been discussing in the Mishnah and the Brisa with Reb Shimon? So he says he wants to teach you something new. Ha Kamash Malan Rish Lakish wants to teach you Agavurka to Rebbe Menachem Ber Yosei to Rebbe Shimon Svirale, that Rebbe Shimon is not actually a Das Yachid, that he has people among them, Reb Menachem, on his side. Okay, and then Hadran Alof Meicheres Abayis, etc. Okay. We've dealt now with selling, forest selling, building selling, land. Now we're going to talk about selling boats. Okay, because that's a keli that people have, and I make a boat, I sell it to you. And then after we talk about boats and their appurtenances, we're going to go to a whole slew of what might reasonably be called fish stories. You know, like if you drive north in Georgia, there's a bridge where there's a huge billboard with this monster fish on it, and it says not actual size. So that's what this Gemara is going to be talking about. Okay. So now we're doing the fishing about if I sell you a boat, and all I write in the transfer document is I'm selling you a boat. Okay? I don't say anything about the lifeboats, and I don't say anything about the sale. I just say I'm selling you a boat. Okay? Mocher es hatarin, so the mast, the upright that holds the sail, which is removable, like if there's a storm, you want to lower the mast, okay, so it's detachable. The hanes, and also the fabric sail involved with the mast. The oigen, and also the anchor. The kol haman higin oisa, and all implements that are necessary for the ship's movement, okay, are sold without stipulation along with the boat. Avalo mocher es ha'avadim, but the slaves, the crew, who happen to be slaves, are not included in the sale of the boat. Velo es ha'martzufin, and not the containers into which the cargo is placed. Okay, the art school calls them sacks. Velo es ha'antiki, and also any cargo that happens to be on the boat when you buy it. So the boat comes into Israel from Spain and it's full of stuff. And you say, that's a nice boat. I want to buy it. And the guy sells you the boat. You obviously are not buying the cargo that's owned by either the people who commissioned the trip or by the ship's owner, and that he retains that. Okay? Now, Ubizman sha'omerlo, but if he says in the document, he v'chol ma shebetoicha, I'm selling you the boat and everything that's currently in and on it, hare kulun meichrin, then you get the cargo and you get the containers and you get the slaves and you get the works. Now, the only issue over here was we said the things that help the boat move without listing them. So the Gemara will discuss that. Okay. But first, we're going to do some etymology. Tarin is karya. The word Tarin in the Mishnah means the mast. V'chein hu omer, just like the pasuk says, Erez milavanon, the cedars from Lebanon lachu he took, lasos Tyrin alecha, to make a mast for you. Okay, nes adra. The nes means the sail. V'chein hu omer, there's a pasuk that says, shesh berikma Mitzrayim. Sheish means beautiful linen that's embroidered that came from Mitzrayim. Hayam Meforshech was spread out lios lechol nes, to become a sail. So you see that the word nes means sail from that pasuk. V'chein hu omer, and another pasuk says sheish berik. Oh, I did that pasuk already. Okay, ugen means the word ugin we translated as anchor. Tane Rebbe Chia brings a brisa. Elu uginin shelo. This is the anchors of the ship, literally the holders back or the restrainers for the ship. As the pasuk says, when Naomi tells Orphaz and Ruth not to go with her, to stay home, she uses a word, v'halahen to saberno ad asher yigdolu halahen, ta'agino, there's that word, ubilti lios leish. And she says, what are you going to do, wait for me to make new babies? They'll hold you back from remarrying. So that to hold back means what holds a boat back are the anchors. Okay, so that manhigin, what does it mean? The things that help the ship move. Omer Revaba says, Elam mishaitin shalach. These are the oars or the poles they use to push a barge in a canal. So the oars on a seafaring boat or the poles that move a barge in a local use boat. V'chein hu omer, and similarly there's a pasuk, alanim me Bashan, oak trees from Bashan, also mishotayich, that they make oars. The boy saying or there's a possibility it could be a different pasuk. Yordu mini osehem kol toifshe mashot, and the people who come out of the boats were rowers. Okay. Now what? Oarsmen. Right. Okay. Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis bring a brisa. Now, we haven't covered other appurtenances to the boat, so we got to deal with them too. So Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis teach, if you sell the ship, Meicher es iskala. The gangplank goes along with the ship. That's considered a part of the ship, not an extra. V'es bor hamayim shebisaycha, and also the copper or metal cauldron that you or cistern that's in a long distance traveling boat to contain fresh water, so that you don't die from thirst on the boat. Rabbi Nosson Aimer HaMeicher Es HaSefina Meicher Es HaBitzitz. He says you also sell the bitzitz, which was going to mean the lifeboats or I forgot the word in English, but they have a small boat that takes you from the boat that's anchored in the harbor to the shore.
I think it's called a tender.
A tender. Okay. So the bitzitz is either a lifeboat or a tender. They're probably the same object. Okay. You're good, Bobby. You're a sailor. Nebuch, we learn new things about you every day.
Wealth of my knowledge.
Wealth of knowledge. Sumchis, and it's not even math. Sumchis Aimer HaMeicher Es HaSefina Meicher Es HaDugis. The dugout. Okay, so he says a different thing, which is also a tender or a lifeboat. Okay, and I think it's similar to the word dugout. Okay, Omer Rava Batzis Hayu Dugis. They both are talking about the same thing, the small boat that's on the big boat. Okay, so why do they use different words? Rebbe Nissen Bebavla. Reb Nissen came from Babylonia. Have kare labutsis, and he used the Babylonian term, which is butsis. Sumchis the bar Eretz Yisrael, but Sumchis was a native-born Israeli. Kare le dugis, and he called it a dugis. Kidichsiv, and he quotes a pasuk. V'achar rischen besiros duga. And your children will be schlepped off in little tenders or lifeboats. Okay, now we're going to get a series of literally a dozen fishy stories. Okay, and they're all agadata. There is a lot of footnotes here because the Gra, the Gaon of Vilna, wrote a sefer in which he tells each of these stories is a homiletic parable. So if you're interested in that, you can learn the footnotes. I'm going to struggle to just get through the basic meaning of the stories without wondering if they're true or not. Omar Rava says, Ishta'uli l'nechuse yoma. The sailors, the people who go out on ships, told me, Hi gala de metaba l'sefina, that there is a wave, a super wave that is so big that it threatens to swamp the ship. Mishaze ki tzutzisa Adenura Tahavrata Beresha. And these super waves have white froth at the top of them. Okay, I mean, if you ever saw a wave, when it breaks, there's that white froth that associated with the wave. But if you take a stick and you bang this big wave, but it's just not any stick. You have to have a stuff written on the stick. And the stick has words on it. The name of God, and Ka, another name of God. Hashem Tzavakais, yet another name of God. Amen, Amen, Selah. So you have this miraculous God-named stick that you hit the super wave, v'nayach, and the wave abates. Okay, that's the first story. Amar Rava tells another story. Ishta'uli lechunse yama, the sailors told me another story. Bengala lagala talsameya parse, that if there are these huge waves, there are 300 parsos between them. Now, a parsa is about 2.5 miles. So we're talking 750 miles. So there are round numbers like 300, like 60 later on, that are guzmas for a lot. So however you want to interpret it, in any event, there's a gap between these huge waves. Zimna Chada, once upon a time, we were traveling on the ship. V'diglinan gala, and a wave picked up the ship. Okay, ad the chazinan ba marbate the kolchavazuta, that we could see the socket in which a small star was set in the heavens. That's how high that the boat was picked up. V'chazili, and it appeared to me, Kimavazer arba'in gerize bazra de hardala, and this socket that held this tiny star seemed to be so big that it was the size of a field on which you could sow 40 measures of mustard seeds. Now, mustard seeds are very tiny. So this means it's a huge number of seeds. So so even the smallest star is gigantic, is what he's saying. Hi, Dilan Tve, and if this wave had picked us up a tiny bit higher, have mekalinan mehavle, we would have been roasted by the heat of that tiny star. Okay? Varame le gala kola lechavrita, and we heard a different wave. This wave talked to the next wave down, the next super wave. Chavrti, but my buddy, shavkat midei, ba'alma delo shetafte. Is there anything left in the world that you haven't personally drowned? Because I'm just holding this ship up. I want to do some damage too. The Nexi Anna da Avde, that there's something I can go and destroy. Did you leave anything for me? Amalei, the wave replied, Puk chazi gevurta damarech. Go and look at the power of Hashem, he says, because Molachuta Chola Velo Avre. God, I can't go across even a very thin strip of sand, literally a thread of sand. So God made a marker that the waves stay in the ocean and they don't go on shore unless they're tsunamis. Okay, Shenemar is a pasuk state. Ha'oisi lo tira'u ne'um Hashem. Aren't you afraid of me, says God? Im mefonai lo tochilu. Don't you tremble in my presence, Asher Samti Chol Gavul Yom, because I made the sand a boundary for the sea. Chok Olam V'lo Ya'avarnehu, and it's a rule of nature that the waves cannot pass over the sand. Next,
we had it in Japan when they had that.
Yes, I know, but that means God gave a special reshus.
Yeah.
That normally waves are supposed to break when they get to the beach, and they're not supposed to destroy the land. That's the normal procedure. The next story. Omarava lididi chazili hurnin. Now, there's another girsa for this is Hormiz, and he is either a full spirit or he is the product of the mating of a spirit with a human. So Hormiz bar Lilis, there's Hormin or Hormiz, the son of a mystical woman named Lilith, who in some Talmudic literature is considered Adam Arishon's first unsuccessful wife, or she is the mother of the Shadim. So in any way, this Hormin or Hormiz is the son of Lilith. Tika rochit apupia de shura de mechuza. And he was running on the wall that surrounded the barrack. What's it called? Bob, I need the word. The wall that surrounds the city of Mechuzah. There's like a ramp at the top where the soldiers stand to shoot the arrows.
Right.
Whatever that ramp is called. So he was running on that. V'rochid parsa ki rochiv v'havsa mataya. And there was a horseman, a soldier on a horse, galloping along inside the wall next to where this Hormuz was running. And Velo Yochele, and Hormuz was faster, he couldn't keep up. Hormuz was faster than the horse. Zimnachada, on one occasion, have mesarga on le tarte kudan yose. There were two bridges across a river, and there was some distance between them. So this guy, this spirit Hormuz, put a saddle on one mule and a saddle on one bridge and a saddle on the mule on the other bridge. The Kaiman and the bridge and the two mules were standing atre Gishrei Derognog on the bridges over the river Rognog. Okay? Vishavar mehai lahai umehai lahai. And as they were crossing the bridge, Hormuz leapt from one mule to the other and back. He kept going back and forth very acrobatically. Furthermore, the nakit tre mizge de chamra biyade and umorkik mehai lahai umehai lahai. And he was juggling two glasses of wine, pouring the wine from one glass to the other.
I saw him on the Ed Sullivan show.
As he was leaping from mule to mule. Okay, velo notva netufta and not a single drop of wine fell to the ground. All right, there's a loophole here because they fell in the water. That's my own comment. V'yala shemayim yordu tahoimos have, and it was so. And that day, the sea was so turbulent that the ships were like in the first story, rising way up and then plummeting way down. Okay, and this was apparently synchronized to Hormuz's leaping from beast to beast. Ad the shamo b'malchus the kat luhu. So the king heard about it and killed him. So if he's totally a spirit, it was the king of the spirits who heard about it and saw this Hormuz showing off in front of people, and spirits are supposed to be more discreet, so he killed him. Or if he's partially human, the king of the area that had these bridges saw that Hormuz's behavior was synchronized with the rough weather, and he killed him to abate the sea in the way Yonah was thrown into the sea. So that's that story. Next story. Omarava Lididi Chazili, I personally saw Ursula bar Yume, a unicorn that was only 1 day old, a newborn unicorn. Tahave kahar to Tabor, and it was huge. It was as big as Mount Tabor. Bahar Tabor kamahave. How big is Mount Tabor? Ara parse. It's 4 parsos. Now, in another Gemara, I think it's in Zvachim, the same story, and it's 40 parsos. But in any event, this baby unicorn is monstrous large. Okay, and we're going to now describe how big this thing is. Omeshocha de Savre Talsa Parse. And just the neck of this creature was 3 parses, that's 7.5 miles long. V'chei marbaita de Reshe Parsa Upalga, and the head was so big that the pillow of under this head of this baby was about 4 miles long, a parsa and a half. Varama kufta, and the baby took a dump in the Yarden River, V'saver le Yardna, and created a dam to block the water until it eventually dissolved in the water and allowed the river to flow again. That was the end of that story. So, Amar Rava Bar Chana, and these are all Rava Bar Chana, and he says he saw them. So many Meforshim say that this is all literally true. Others say, as does the Gra, that it, what?
Smoking crack.
Right. Whatever he was doing. No, he can't say he was maybe
okay.
hash, but not crack.
Oh, no, legalized marijuana.
Amar Love Bar Chana, Rav Bar Chana tells a new story. L'didi chazili haho akrukta. I personally saw a monstrous toad, Dahavileka Akra Dahagrunya, that was the size of the city of Accra. Accra Dahagrunya Kamahave. How big was that town in Chagrunya? Shisin Bote, 60 houses. Now, again, that's a round number, and it means a bunch of houses. Okay, it doesn't have to literally mean 60. But in any event, now we're going to have an interesting event that comes along. The Asa Tanina Bala, and a sea critter that was so big that it could swallow this toad in one gulp. Okay? V'salek yahev be'elyona. And then this monster, the sea monster, I guess the frog got caught in its throat because it thrashed around and jumped up and landed in a tree. Okay? So the Gemara interrupts the story and tells us, "V'so chazi kama nafish chele de ilana." You can imagine how strong the branches of that tree are. Amar Rav Papa bar Shmuel, and Rav Papa bar Shmuel, who had been accompanying Rav Chana, says, the Amar Rabba bar Rav Chana zimna chada have ka azlinen bisvin. Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped. Amar Rav Papa bar Shmuel ilo have hosam lo hemini. Had I not personally been there and seen all this happen, I wouldn't believe it. But since I saw it, I know it to be true. Okay, next story. Amar Rabba bar Rav Chana, Zimnachada, once upon a time, Haveka Azlinen Bisvinta, we were going on, traveling in a ship, V'chazinan Hahu Kavra, and we saw a fish, okay? The Yasvale Achla Tuna Beursai.
You didn't finish the one before it.
Yes, I did. Omer Rav Papa Bar Shmuel lo have hasam lo hamine. If I hadn't been there, I wouldn't have believed it.
You don't have to have much more.
Whatever. Okay, so next story. Omer Rava Bar Chana tells one more story. Zimna Chada, once upon a time, Havi Loka Azlin and Bisvin also, we were going together in a ship. V'chazin and Hahu Kavra, I saw a certain fish. The Yasvale Achla Tuna Be'urse, and a critter called a Achla Tuna crawled into the nose of this fish. And some girsas have the fish died, and some leave that word out. Okay. Va'ad huhu maya deshad yunhu laguda, and a wave tossed this now dead fish, or not yet dead fish, onto the bank of the body of water that this was in. V'chorav minei shisin mechuze, and 60 towns were clustered near each other, and this fish was so big that it crashed into and destroyed all 60 towns. V'yuchel minei shisin mechuze, and people from 60 other cities that were nearby came and started cutting up this fish for food, and consumed as much as all the populations of those cities. And yet there was still so much of this fish meat left after all of that, that 60 other cities came. Omoluchu mine shisin mechuze, that townspeople of 60 other cities came and salted the remaining meat to preserve it, so they would have meals for a long time. So this was a big, big fish. Okay? Umilohu mechad galgalo, the ine talas mea garve mashcha, and they pierced the eyeball of this big fish, and from it they got oil that would fill 300 barrels. Okay, v'chi chadnan the basar tarsar yarche shasa, and when we went back a year later to see what was happening with the remains of this big fish, chazinan dahave ko menasre megargame metal litza, we saw them cutting up the skeleton of this fish to make you use the rib of the fish as the support for the fabric of a tent. Okay, and they used the remnants of the skeleton of this fish to rebuild the 60 cities that were initially destroyed. V'yasve lemivnaihu hanach mechuze, and they rebuilt the destroyed cities. Next story. Amar Rava bar Rav Chana, Zimna Chada have ka azlinen besifneta. We were traveling in a ship. V'chazinen nahu kavra, we saw a big, big, big fish. V'yasva, but we didn't know it was a fish. Later on, we'll know it's a fish. But we saw the yasvale cholsa agave, that there was sand on the back of this big fish. V'korach agma alave, and grass was growing in the sand on the back of the fish. Okay, Savrinen yevashta he, and we thought it was a dry land island. Okay, V'salkinon afinon bishlinon agave. And we decided to interrupt our voyage, and we went and we lived on this meadow in the middle of the ocean on this big fish. Okay, but they made a mistake. Okay, afinon bishlinon agave. They built a fire and they baked and cooked on the back of this big fish, and the fish got uncomfortable from the heat. Over kadcham, and because of the heat, gave is chafech, it flipped over to cool its back in the water. And these guys were now underwater. Ve'i lav tahava mikarva svinta. And if it weren't for the fact that our ship was docked very close to where this Ois Island was, have tavinan, we would have all drowned. Okay, one more story. Omar Rava bar Rav Chana, same player. Zimnun chada have azlinan b'sifnita. We were traveling in a ship. V'sage svinta ben shitza l'shitza dekavra. Most fish have one dorsal fin, but some fish have their dorsal fin somewhat forward and have a small fin behind the dorsal fin before the tail. So what we're talking about is a two-fin fish, okay? And our ship was journeying from the front fin to the back fin on the back of this humongous fish, okay? And it took talsin yomi, talsin lailavasa. It took 3 days and 3 nights to travel from the one fin to the other on the ship, okay? Unless you think that it was just the fish are standing still and they're leisurely sailing along, no. They're being pushed by the wind in one direction, and the fish is swimming upstream in the other direction. Talsa Yuma v'Talsa Lavasa, the 3 days and 3 nights. Ihu b'zikfa, the fish was swimming upwind. Va'anan b'shvulo, and we were traveling with the wind, hitting the sail, moving us. So you can see how humongous this fish was. Now, if you were saying that the fish didn't really go that far, but because the boat didn't really go that far, because the fish was going the other way, the gap wasn't that great. Kiyasa Reb Dimi, I remember when Reb Dimi came from Bavel, he told us this story, and he said, that in the time it takes to boil a pot of water, Masyiga Shisin Parse, the ship was sailing so fast that in the time it took to bring a pot of water to a boil, the ship went 60 parses, which is like 150 miles. And that was just to boil water. You can imagine how far it was for 3 days and 3 nights. V'shade parsa gira the kadma lay, and not only that, but to give you a measure of how fast this boat was moving, if an archer were to shoot an arrow, the ship would have outraced said arrow. V'amar Ravashi, and Ravashi told us a story because somebody must have questioned, yeah, but most fish only have one dorsal fin. And he said, no, hahu gildna the yom chave, that the glidna fish of the sea, the Isle Tre Shavse happens to be a double finned fish. So maybe this thing was a supersized glidna. Okay, next story. Omer Rava Bar Kana tells another story. Zimna Chada Have Azlinan Disifneta. We were traveling in a ship, and this time it's not a fish, it's a bird. V'chazinin hahud sifra. We saw a humongous bird. Tekaim ad kartsule b'maya, and it was standing on the bed of the water, and the top of the sea reached the ankles of this big bird. Okay? No comment, Bob,
No comment.
about the
Sounds
big
pretty
bird?
fishy to me,
Big
that's
bird.
all.
What?
Sounds pretty fishy.
Well, but this time it's birds. This story, the others were fishy. This one's for the
marker
birds.
for big bird, huh?
Okay. Varesha Varokia. And this bird was so big that his head was all the way up in heaven. Okay. The Amrina Lekamaya. And we said that this has to be fairly shallow because the water is only up to the ankle of the bird. Ubainan lachus akrure nafshin. So we decided that we'll jump off the boat and we'll cool ourselves because it's shallow water and our feet will touch the ground. The Nafek Baskala, and a heavenly, a baskol came from heaven. The Omer Lon, and it told us, Lo techusu hacha, do not get off the boat. Literally, don't go down. The naflos le chatzitza debar nagra, because a carpenter dropped his axe. That was 7 years ago that he dropped the axe into this water. Veloka matia ara, and the head of the axe, even though it's metal, has not yet touched the ground beneath this water body. Velav mishum de nafishe maya. And it's not just that the water is very, very deep. Ela mishum de rudfe maya. It's because the water is turbulent. Va'omar Ravashi, and Ravashi explained, Hahu ziz shadaihu. This bird is called a ziz shadai. Tiksiv, as it says in the pasuk, v'ziv shadai imodni, and the ziv shadai is with me, God says, because the head is up in heaven. So the bird is right next to me. Okay. Now, we'll do one more or two more stories. Amar Rava Bar Rav Chana, he explained the Zimna Chada, once upon a time, Haveka Azlinen B'madbara. We were going not on the land, at sea this time, we're going on land. V'chazinen Hanu Avaze, and we saw a bunch of geese. The Shamte Gad Paihu Mishamnaihu. And these geese had so much liquid fat under their skin that the feathers fell out of the geese, and they were now naked geese. V'ko nagde nachale lemishcha misusayu. And because of the pores where the feathers had been in the skin, now this liquid oil is dripping out of the geese. Now, fatty food in a culture where it's mostly agricultural is a big time delicacy. So we have these incredible fatty geese, right? Aminalahu, I said to the geese, Islan legavaichu chelka li'alma de ase. Will we get to eat a piece of you when we get to the world to come? Sachada dale gadfa, one goose lifted its wing. Vachada gale atma, and one goose lifted its leg. Meaning, you prefer to have barbecued goose wings, or do you want the pulki? So apparently we'll get them, right? Ki ashe lakaime de Rav Elazar omali. But when we got back and we told Rav Elazar about this, asidin Yisrael liten alehen esadin, that the Jews will be judged and unfavorably, in parentheses, because of these geese. So the Meforshim explained that these geese were clearly not very comfortable because they had no feathers and they're losing their fat. Now, if the Jews had been all terrific people, then Mashiach would come, the Beis Hamikdash would be built, it would be Li'olam Haba, and we would get to eat the geese and they wouldn't suffer anymore. But since we're not perfect people, it's been thousands of years, Mashiach has not come, and we're going to have to pay the price, metaphorically, for the suffering of the geese. Okay, and we'll stop there because it's a whole new series of stories coming up. Now, Rav Shimon had cataract surgery on Tuesday. He's feeling fine. I spoke to him yesterday. He's going to give the daf tomorrow, Sunday, and Monday. He's doing the second eye on Tuesday. So I'm giving the daf Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
Eyes have it.
What?
The eyes have it.
The eyes have it.
That's right.
So if you want to take the time and read the footnotes, the Gra has very interesting take on these fishy stories.
Yeah, I heard one from Manga here. You looked at Bamba Basra. It's a hawker part of it. Forget about the guy. It's all logic.
Yeah.
Complete logic. You go through the
Right.
common war.
Well, we just said, I mean, if you buy a boat, you get to sail, but you don't get the slaves. I mean, it makes sense.
So that's why these advantages have been disrespected. It shows that this, even though it's logic, it's told.
That there's more to it.
There's more to it. The whole
What if you need a slave?
Either that, or it's like, when I went fishing, I caught a fish.
What if they pull the boat along the shore by a rope and it's slaves that they needed slaves to pull the boat?
Well, that was what I said. There were poles that they used or slaves to pull, but they don't go with the boat unless you say so.
Unless you say so.
That's what we learned.
So, but then the boat can't move without the slaves.
Well, you get your own damn slaves. You bought a boat, buy slaves. Pay extra and get the slaves. It's just telling us it's not automatic. Just like you don't get the tree or the well if you buy the land.
That's what the word longshoreman came from.
What?
You have to ask how much it costs. You can't afford it.
That's right. Or, the two happiest days in the life of a guy who buys a boat is the day he buys it and the day he sells it.
A lot of work.
Or what's the definition of a yacht? A hole in the ocean that you throw money in.
Uh-huh. Probably one thing I will never know about. Yachts a lot. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. It was fun going through these stories.
Now you know where you get the term fish food.
Now let's stay to the Quran.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day. Marty, thank you for the cookies. Okay?
Okay. Yeah, my yes.
The next one is an Arab who can smell sand and tell you where there's water.
Not oil?
Huh? No. Well, you know, God gave the Arabs oil, but he gave the Jews gas. And in fact, now Israel has that gas field offshore.
And if Moshe would have turned right instead of.
Right. Then you'd be wearing a kafia.
Good day, gentlemen.
Have a great Erev Shabbos, all.
That's
Okay.
what they say. Why did the Yidden spend 40 years in the Midbar? Because Moshe Rabbeinu, being a man, wouldn't ask for direction.
Right. Men don't ask for directions, right? Very cute. Okay. Oh, yeah. It's getting harder. I can't even button my buttons anymore.
They're making the buttons bigger.
I know they make a buttoner. They make a gadget that does the buttoning for you. Because I'm not the only one that has that.
Yeah.
Okay. So have a good Shabbos. And my wife will talk to your wife about rescheduling.
He said this to me on the top.
Oh, she did already?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I tell you the truth, you're, I don't want you to get a swelled head, but I consider you like a favorite person. And when you did come with your wife, she was very erudite, funny, and charming. I don't know what she's doing with you.
Yeah.
Okay. I
Say
guess
that to her. She said, "You put my husband."
all right. That's last week. Dead people. I don't need them anymore. It's this week's dead people. Bob, your phone.
Well, he still has the power.
Okay. Okay, have a great day. Oh, there are a couple of dollars in the in that box, right, the red box right in front of the Folger box. Somebody took and put money in there.
No, you got a chip on the strap on your bed.
Oh no, I never do. Till the first time.
Till the first time, okay. Yeah, no, kid was seeing me yesterday, got a, what we suggest I think. Maybe we should have a pusher there. Somebody just robbed the pusher. Yeah. That's Judy.